Dan Blocker, the gentle giant of Bonanza, the man whose laughter and kindness made Hoss Cartwright feel like family to millions of viewers, walked onto the Ponderosa Ranch for the last time in April 1972. For 13 seasons, he carried a presence that was both comforting and unshakable. A brother, a son, a friend, a hero in the eyes of audiences and cast alike. But that final episode, One Ace Too Many, holds a weight no script could ever have anticipated. It was not Hoss's story, not his moment in the sun, yet it would become the episode that millions would later watch through tears, knowing it was the last time he would grace their screens. Behind the scenes, the cast faced disbelief, grief, and the impossible task of continuing without the heart of their family. How does a show go on when the warmth that anchored it is gone? How do fans watch knowing that the man they loved is no longer there? Today we step onto the Ponderosa one last time with Dan Blocker and uncover why this episode is far too hard to watch. Dan Blocker stepped onto the set of Bonanza in 1959, bringing with him a presence that was impossible to ignore. Towering at 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders and an easy smile, he carried an energy that was both commanding and gentle. From the very first episodes, he became not just a character on a screen, but a living, breathing member of the Cartwright family. As Hoss Cartwright, the middle son of Ben Cartwright, he was a figure of strength and kindness, a man whose heart was as large as his frame. Audiences across the country came to see him as more than a character. They felt they knew him, understood him, and shared in his quiet humor and unwavering loyalty. Hoss was the embodiment of warmth. He was a man who could lift a log or a heart with equal ease. On the Ponderosa Ranch, his gentle nature contrasted with his formidable size, and this duality became the soul of the series. He was not the sharpest in all matters of business or the quickest in all affairs of the mind, but he was brave, loyal, and endlessly compassionate. Viewers saw in him the brother they wished they had, the son every family could be proud of, and the friend who never faltered. It was this authenticity that made audiences laugh, cry, and care, and it is what transformed Dan Blocker from an actor into a presence that lingered in living rooms and hearts alike. Off-screen, Dan was the same man he portrayed on screen. Colleagues describe him as gentle, kind, and generous, a presence that brought a sense of ease to the long days of filming. He was protective of his castmates, deeply committed to the work, and always aware of the importance of his role in shaping the tone of the show. His warmth was not performance, it was character, lived in real time, a gift he gave to those around him. The other members of the Cartwright family, Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, and Michael Landon, all leaned on him in ways that the audience could never fully see, drawing strength from his calm confidence, his humor, and his patience. He was a brother in truth as much as Hoss was on the screen, and his absence would be felt immediately and profoundly when it came. Dan's presence was also pivotal to the chemistry of Bonanza. The show thrived on the interplay of the Cartwright family, their differences and their mutual respect and affection. Hoss became the heart, the emotional anchor around which stories unfolded. He could diffuse tension with a smile, inspire courage with a quiet word, and remind every viewer that the essence of the series was family. Without him, the stories would still exist, but the soul of Bonanza, the balance of strength and kindness, laughter and warmth, was uniquely his. He helped define the identity of the show and made it relatable to millions of households in America. Audiences came to love Bonanza, not only for the sweeping landscapes and Western adventures, but for the people who lived there, and Hoss was central to that love. His loyalty to his family, his gentle humor, and his unwavering moral compass became synonymous with the show itself. It was a role that Dan Blocker inhabited with authenticity, care, and humility. For 13 years, from 1959 to 1972, he carried Hoss through every trial, every story, every laugh, and every tear. And in doing so, he left an imprint on the hearts of viewers that time cannot erase. a reminder that sometimes the most powerful strength is the kindness we show to others. Dan Blocker's final episode on Bonanza was titled One Ace Too Many, and it aired in April 1972, marking the end of his 13-year journey as Eric Hoss Cartwright. Yet, the episode was not centered on Hoss. Instead, the story followed Bradley Meredith, a guest character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Ben Cartwright, played by Lorne Greene. Bradley appeared previously in one episode, and in this story he returned as an antagonist, attempting to deceive the townspeople while the Cartwrights were away from the Ponderosa. He tried to sell off Ben's assets and claim the profits as his own. And though his plan was ultimately foiled, the tension and stakes of the episode created an unusual focus for a show that normally revolved around the Cartwright family. For viewers, however, the knowledge that this was Dan Blocker's last performance lent the episode a weight that went far beyond its scripted drama. Hoss was present, but in small, fleeting moments. He moved through the story with his usual quiet strength, his familiar warmth casting a soft glow over each scene he entered. Even in the limited time he had on screen, audiences could feel his presence, the same kindness and gentle humor that had been a constant for over a decade. It was a reminder of who Hoss was to the Cartwright family, and to the viewers at home, a steadying force, a source of comfort, and a figure whose absence would soon be impossible to ignore. The episode itself was intended to be another installment in the ongoing adventures of the Cartwrights, but history transformed it into something much more. The premiere of Bonanza's 14th season was planned to feature Hoss in a storyline that celebrated his character, a wedding that would have highlighted his warmth, his loyalty, and his humor. That vision never came to life. The sudden passing of Dan Blocker shortly after the season 13 finale forced the show's writers and cast to reconsider everything. The joy and lightheartedness that had defined Hoss's role would be replaced with grief, not only for the characters but for the people who brought them to life. Behind the scenes, the cast and crew were grappling with disbelief and sadness. Dan was only 43, healthy and strong, and his death was sudden and unimaginable. Michael Landon, who played Little Joe Cartwright, had to step into new responsibilities both on screen and behind the camera. He would soon face the difficult task of helping to carry the show forward, while mourning someone who had been like a brother to him. Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, and the rest of the cast shared the same struggle, balancing the continuation of the series with the profound loss of a colleague, a friend, and a man whose presence had been at the heart of Bonanza. Even now, One Ace Too Many is remembered not for the villain's schemes or the episode's plot twists, but for the quiet brilliance of Dan Blocker's final performance. Every glance, every gesture, every line he delivered carries a weight of finality, a reminder of the talent, kindness, and humanity that he brought to the screen. It is an episode that cannot be watched without a sense of poignancy, for it marks the conclusion of an era, the last chapter in a story that had been shared by millions of viewers over 13 years. One Ace Too Many is more than a television episode. It is a testament to the man who played Hoss, a final gift from Dan Blocker to the audiences who loved him so deeply. The world of Bonanza was shaken in 1972 when news came that Dan Blocker, the gentle giant who had played Hoss Cartwright for 13 years, had passed away. The cast and crew, who had known him as a friend, a colleague, and in many ways a brother, were left in stunned silence. Dan had gone in for what was expected to be routine gallbladder surgery. It was a procedure that seemed ordinary, straightforward, and safe. Everyone assumed he would recover quickly and return to the Ponderosa, to the set, to the family that had grown up around him. But life, in its quiet cruelty, had other plans. Dan developed blood clots in his lungs following the surgery. The complications were sudden and catastrophic. At just 43 years old, he was gone, leaving behind not only a grieving cast but millions of viewers who had come to love Hoss Cartwright as if he were their own. The loss was incomprehensible. Dan was a man of towering presence, 6 feet 3 inches of warmth and strength, a figure who seemed larger than life yet deeply human in every gesture. On screen he had been fearless yet gentle. Off-screen he carried that same generosity and care. His death was not only a shock but a profound rupture in the life of a show that had relied on him for over a decade. Lorne Greene, who portrayed Ben Cartwright, spoke with disbelief at the funeral, and later remembered being unable to fathom that someone so strong, so vital, could be taken by what appeared to be a minor medical issue. Michael Landon, Hoss's on-screen younger brother, felt the loss deeply and personally. Their bond had extended far beyond the scripts and cameras. Michael had shared scenes, jokes, and long days of filming with Dan, and now he was left to navigate the grief of losing a man who had been in so many ways a real-life older brother. The emotional weight on the set of Bonanza was immense. Every member of the cast felt the absence immediately. The energy Dan brought, the calm he offered, the laughter and reassurance that had always been part of the filming experience was gone. Scenes that had once been light with camaraderie now carried a subtle, unspoken sorrow. The family on screen mirrored, in some ways, the grief of the actors themselves. Audiences would sense it even if they could not name it. Hoss had always been the heart of the Cartwright family, the figure whose presence balanced strength with kindness, and suddenly, that heart was missing. Dan Blocker's death reshaped the show in ways that were both practical and profoundly emotional. The writers faced the impossible task of reworking scripts and storylines that had been intended to include Hoss. Michael Landon assumed new responsibilities, both in front of the camera and behind it, stepping into a role that demanded creativity, resilience, and the quiet courage that Dan had always embodied. The cast too adjusted, leaning on one another for support, trying to preserve the warmth and continuity of Bonanza while navigating a grief that was impossible to fully express. Yet, in the midst of this sorrow, the legacy of Dan Blocker remained luminous. He had left behind more than a character. He had left a presence, a model of integrity and generosity, a warmth that could not be replaced. Audiences would continue to remember Hoss Cartwright, not only for the adventures on the Ponderosa, but for the humanity that Dan Blocker poured into every moment he spent there. His death marked a turning point, a moment when life and art collided, leaving an absence that was felt deeply, both on screen and off. And it is that absence, that weight of loss, that makes Dan Blocker's final appearance so profoundly difficult to watch. The sudden loss of Dan Blocker left Bonanza at a crossroads. The show had been centered on the Cartwright family for over a decade, and Hoss had been the heart that held it together. With his passing, the writers and cast faced the immense challenge of continuing the story without the presence that had shaped it from the very beginning. The premiere of the 14th season, originally planned around Hoss getting married, had to be completely rewritten. The laughter, warmth, and gentle strength that Hoss had always brought to the screen could not be replicated, yet the show had to move forward. Michael Landon, who portrayed Little Joe Cartwright, stepped into this void with quiet determination. His role expanded both on-screen and behind the camera. As a director and writer for the series, he carried the responsibility of reimagining storylines and preserving the spirit of Bonanza while mourning someone he considered a brother. Every decision he made was informed by the memory of Dan, and the pressure was immense. Landon sought to handle Hoss's absence subtly, choosing not to focus on the character's death within the early episodes, but to allow the presence of the remaining Cartwrights to honor what had been lost. The series made television history in how it addressed the passing of a beloved actor. Hoss was killed off quietly in the premiere of the 14th season, a first in television at the time. Previously, popular characters had been written off through relocation, disappearance, or other plot devices, but never as a result of the actor's death. The news of Hoss's passing was delivered almost offhandedly, with little explanation, a decision made to respect both the memory of Dan Blocker and the continuity of the series. Later in the 1988 reunion film Bonanza: The Next Generation, audiences would finally learn the full story. Hoss had died heroically, saving a woman from drowning. This posthumous heroism offered fans a sense of closure, a way to honor the man behind the character, and the generosity he had shown both on and off the screen. The 14th season also introduced a new character, Griff King, portrayed by Tim Matheson. Griff was a parolee who arrived at the Ponderosa seeking work and a chance to turn his life around. While Griff brought a fresh dynamic to the series, he could not replace Hoss, nor was he intended to. The audience had come to love the warmth, humor, and loyalty that Hoss embodied, and no new character could replicate that connection. Instead, the writers and cast worked to maintain the emotional balance of the show, leaning more heavily on Little Joe's storylines and Michael Landon's growing presence to sustain the series, while honoring the legacy of Dan Blocker. Despite these efforts, the 14th season faced challenges in retaining its audience. The absence of Hoss was palpable, and fans struggled to adjust to the new dynamics. Ratings declined, and the series, which had thrived for over a decade, approached its natural conclusion. Yet even in this period of change and grief, the bond among the cast and crew remained steadfast. On set, Michael Landon gave a heartfelt tribute to Dan, speaking of his kindness, humor, and the quiet leadership he had always offered. He became a pillar for the cast, maintaining morale and preserving the warmth that had defined Bonanza, even as they worked through the sorrow of their loss. The final episodes of Bonanza, shaped by the absence of Dan Blocker, stand as a testament to both the fragility and the resilience of life, and to the power of human connection. Hoss's absence was felt in every scene, in every quiet glance and interaction among the Cartwrights. Yet through the grief and challenge, the show persisted, carrying forward the legacy of a man whose warmth, humor, and generosity had defined it for 13 seasons. Bonanza would soon end, but the memory of Hoss and the man who brought him to life remained indelible, a quiet yet enduring presence in the hearts of those who loved him and the millions who watched. The story of Hoss Cartwright did not end with the cancellation of Bonanza. Years later, in 1988, audiences finally received closure with the made-for-television reunion film, Bonanza: The Next Generation. It was here that the full story of Hoss's death was revealed, giving the fans who had loved him for so long a sense of peace. The film showed that Hoss had died while saving a woman from drowning, a final act of bravery that mirrored the kindness and courage he had displayed throughout the series. For viewers, it was more than just an explanation. It was a tribute, a recognition of the generosity and heart that Dan Blocker had brought to every scene. For those who had grown up watching Bonanza, Hoss was never simply a character. He was the embodiment of strength tempered with warmth, a figure whose presence comforted and inspired. Dan Blocker's performance created a bond that transcended the screen. Audiences laughed at his gentle humor, cheered at his quiet courage, and felt the weight of his sorrow and joy, as if it were their own. That bond endured even after his passing, leaving a space that was impossible to fill, and a memory that remained vivid. The cast and crew also carried that memory with them. Michael Landon, who had worked alongside Dan for over a decade, spoke often of the depth of their relationship. On screen, they were brothers. Off-screen, they shared a connection built on trust, respect, and genuine affection. Landon took on the responsibility of guiding the series through its final season, honoring Dan's legacy with every decision he made. Even in moments of laughter or tension during filming, the absence of Hoss was felt, and the cast approached each day with a blend of dedication and remembrance. The legacy of Dan Blocker extends beyond Bonanza itself. His portrayal of Hoss helped define the family-centered Western, bringing heart to a genre often dominated by action and adventure. He showed that strength could coexist with kindness, that courage could be gentle, and that one man could touch the lives of millions while remaining humble and generous. That impact is enduring. Fans continue to remember Hoss Cartwright as a hero, not because of the adventures he lived on screen, but because of the humanity that Dan Blocker infused into the role. Even now, decades later, the episodes that feature Dan Blocker, carry a resonance that is both emotional and profound. His laughter, his gentle gestures, and the warmth he brought to the Cartwright family continue to move audiences. One Ace Too Many, his final episode, is viewed through a lens of love and remembrance. Each line he spoke, each scene he inhabited, becomes a quiet testament to a man who gave so much of himself to his craft and to the people who watched him. The impact of his presence is felt long after the cameras stopped rolling, a reminder that the warmth of one individual can leave an indelible mark on the hearts of many. Dan Blocker's final chapter on Bonanza reminds us that television is more than entertainment. It is a space where human connection can flourish, where audiences can find comfort, and where the heart of a single performer can resonate across generations. His life and work endure not as a memory of loss alone, but as a celebration of the compassion, strength, and warmth he brought to the world, both on and off the screen. The story of Hoss Cartwright, shaped by Dan Blocker's presence, remains a testament to the power of kindness and the lasting impact of a life lived with generosity. Dan Blocker's presence on Bonanza was more than a performance. It was a gift of warmth, kindness, and quiet strength that shaped an entire series and touched the hearts of millions. As Hoss Cartwright, he embodied loyalty, courage, and gentle humor, creating a character that felt real, relatable, and deeply human. His absence was felt immediately after his untimely passing in 1972, and the void he left on the Ponderosa could never be filled. Yet through the stories, the laughter, and the quiet moments of his final episodes, Dan's spirit remains alive. Even decades later, fans watch One Ace Too Many and feel the weight of his final scenes, a poignant reminder of the man behind the character. The reunion film in 1988 gave closure to Hoss's story, honoring the bravery and heart that defined him. But more than that, it reminded viewers of Dan Blocker himself, a gentle giant whose life and work continue to inspire. His legacy is one of generosity, warmth, and humanity, a reminder that the heart of a person endures far beyond the screen. For more emotional stories, check out this video.